Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost of the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Without further ado, returning to The Call of the Wild as read by Lord Naren White. Gad, sir, Gad, sir, stuttered a member of the latest dynasty, a king of the Skookum benches. I offer you 800 for him, sir, before the test, 800 just as he stands. Thornton shook his head and stepped to Buck's side. You must stand off from him, Mathewson protested. Free play and plenty of room. The crowd fell silent. Only could be heard the voices of the gamblers vainly offering 2-1. Everybody acknowledged Buck, a magnificent animal, but 25-pound sacks of flour bulked too large in their eyes for them to loosen their pouch strings. Thornton knelt down by Buck's side. He took his head in his two hands and rested cheek on cheek. He did not playfully shake him as was his wont, or murmur soft love curses, but he whispered in his ear, As you love me, Buck, as you love me, was what he whispered. Buck whined with suppressed eagerness. The crowd was watching curiously. The affair was growing mysterious. It seemed like a conjuration. As Thornton got to his feet, Buck seized his mittened hand between his jaws, pressing in with his teeth and releasing slowly, half reluctantly. It was the answer, in terms not of speech, but of love. Thornton stepped well back. Now, Buck, he said. Buck tightened the traces, then slacked them for a matter of several inches. It was the way he had learned. Gee! Thornton's voice rang out, sharp in the tense silence. Buck swung to the right, ending the movement in a plunge that took up the slack and with a sudden jerk arrested his 150 pounds. The load quivered, and from under the runners arose a crisp crackling. Haw! Thornton commanded. Buck duplicated the maneuver, this time to the left. The crackling turned into a snapping, the sled pivoting and the runners slipping and granting several inches to the side. The sled was broken out. Men were holding their breaths, intensely unconscious of the fact. Now, mush! Thornton's command cracked out like a pistol shot. Buck threw himself forward, tightening the traces with a jarring lunge. His whole body was gathered compactly together in the tremendous effort, the muscles writhing and knotting like live things under the silky fur. His great chest was low to the ground, his head forward and down while his feet were flying like mad, the claws scarring in hard-packed snow in parallel grooves. The sled swayed and trembled, half started forward. One of his feet slipped and one man groaned aloud. Then the sled lurched ahead in what appeared a rapid succession of jerks, though it never really came to a dead stop again. Half an inch, 2 inches. The jerks perceptibly diminished. As the sled gained momentum, he caught them up till it was moving steadily along. Men gasped and began to breathe again, unaware that for a moment they had ceased to breathe. Thornton was running behind, encouraging Buck with short, cheery words. The distance had been measured off, and as he neared the pile of firewood which marked the end of the 100 yards, a cheer began to grow and grow, which burst into a roar as he passed the firewood and halted at command. Every man was tearing himself loose, even Mathewson. Hats and mittens were flying in the air. Men were shaking hands. It did not matter with whom, and bubbling over in a general incoherent babble. But Thornton fell back on his knees beside Buck. Head was against head, and he was shaking him back and forth. Those who hurried up heard him cursing Buck, and he cursed him long and fervently, and softly and lovingly. Gad, sir, spluttered the Skookum bench king. I'll give you 1,000 for him, sir, 1,000, sir, 1,200, sir. Thornton rose to his feet. His eyes were wet. The tears were streaming frankly down his cheeks. Sir, he said to the Skookum bench king, no, sir, you can go to hell, sir. It's the best I can do for you, sir. Buck seized Thornton's hand in his teeth. Thornton shook him back and forth, as though animated by a common impulse. The onlookers drew back to a respectful distance, nor were they again indiscreet enough to interrupt. Chapter 7. The Sounding of the Call. When Buck earned $1,600 in 5 minutes for John Thornton, he made it possible for his master to pay off certain debts and to journey with his partners into the East after a fabled lost mine, the history of which was old as the history of the country. Many men had sought it, few had found it, and more than a few there were who had never returned from the quest. This lost mine was steeped in tragedy and shrouded in mystery. No one knew of the first man. The oldest tradition stopped before it got back to him. From the beginning, there had been an ancient and ramshackle cabin. Dying men had sworn to it, and to the mine, the site of which had marked, clinching the testimony with nuggets that were unlike any known grade of gold in Northland. But no living man had looted this treasure house, and the dead were dead. Wherefore John Thornton and Pete and Hans, with Buck and a half other dozen other dogs, faced into the east on an unknown trail to achieve where men and dogs as good as themselves had failed. They sledded 70 miles up to the Yukon, swung to the left onto the Stewart River, past the Mayo and the McQuestion, and held on until the Stewart itself became a streamlet, threading the upstanding peaks which marked the backbone of the continent. John Thornton asked little of man or nature. He was unafraid of the wild. With a handful of salt and a rifle, he could plunge into the wilderness and fare wherever he pleased and as long as he pleased. Being in no haste, Indian fashion, he hunted his dinner in the course of the day's travel, and if he failed to find it like the Indian, he kept on traveling, secure in the knowledge that sooner or later he would come to it. So, on this great journey into the east, straight meat was the bill of fare. Ammunition and tools principally made up the load on the sled, and the time card was drawn upon the limitless future. To Buck it was boundless delight, this hunting, fishing, and indefinite wandering through strange places. For weeks at a time they would hold on steadily, day after day, and for weeks upon end they would camp, here and there, the dogs loafing and the men burning holes through frozen muck and gravel, and washing countless pans of dirt by the heat of the fire. Sometimes they went hungry. Sometimes they feasted riotously, all according to the abundance of game and the fortune of hunting. Summer arrived, and dogs and men packed on their backs rafted across blue mountain lakes, and descended or ascended unknown rivers in slender boats whipsawed from the standing forest. The months came and went, and back and forth they twisted through the uncharted vastness, where no men were there, and yet where men had been, if the lost cabin were true. They went across divides and summer blizzards, shivered under the midnight sun on naked mountains between the timber line and the eternal snows, dropped into the summer valleys amid swarming gnats and flies, and in the shadows of glaciers picked strawberries and flowers, as ripe and fair as any the Southland could boast. In the fall of the year they penetrated a weird lake country, sad and silent where wildfowl had been, but where then there was no life nor sign of life, only the blowing of chill winds, the forming of ice in sheltered places, and the melancholy rippling of waves on lonely beaches. And through another winter they wandered on the obliterated trails of men who had gone before. Once they came upon a path blazed through the forest, an ancient path, and the lost cabin seemed very near. But the path began nowhere and ended nowhere, and it remained mystery. As the man who made it and the reason he made it remained mystery, another time they chanced upon the graven wreckage of a hunting lodge, and amid the shreds of rotten blankets, John Thornton found a long-barreled flintlock. He knew it for a Hudson Bay company with the gun of the young days in the Northwest, when such a gun was worth its height in beaver skins packed flat. And that was all no hint as to the man who in an early day had reared the lodge and left the gun among the blankets. Spring came on once more. At the end of all their wandering they found not the lost cabin, but a shallow placer in a broad valley where the gold showed like yellow butter across the bottom of the washing pan. They sought no farther. Each day they worked, earned them thousands of dollars in clean dust and nuggets, and they worked every day. The gold was sacked in moosehide bags, 50 pounds to the bag, and piled like so much firewood outside the Spruce Bow Lodge. Like giants they toiled, days flashing on the heels of days like dreams as they heaped the treasure up. There was nothing for the dogs to do save the hauling in of meat now and again that Thornton killed, and Buck spent long hours musing by the fire. The vision of the short-legged, hairy man came to him more frequently, now that there was little work to be done, and often blinking by the fire, Buck wandered with him in that other world which he remembered. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.